welcome one and all. It's Dreams and Songs to Sing podcast. I'm Tony Hall, and we're almost there, folks. Apparently, we can go back into the land of the living as of next week, so we're almost there. But we're going to end this lockdown on a really good podcast today. I've got, as usual, Anto Point with me. Anto, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Anto.
And I've got Neil Dunworth here for the Love of Paul McGrath podcast, a Villa-based podcast. Neil, absolute pleasure.
Thanks very much for having me on, guys.
No worries. And I'm going to start with you on some big Liverpool news before we get stuck into Villa. It's the morning after the night before where we saw a bird we fancy go off with another bloke, Timo Werner. Is this the one that got away, or good riddance? We never fancied him anyway.
Well, it's a great metaphor because I think we're both very familiar with that scenario. No, it's a shame. I think Liverpool fans we're disappointed because this guy, he looks like a superstar in the making, and he just seems so perfect for Liverpool as well, didn't he? Like, he wanted to come. He so clearly wanted to come. He looks tailor-made to slot into the system that Klopp plays, and his pace and his versatility. So I think every Liverpool fan just thought it was a done deal. It would have been a done deal, I think, had the old COVID. Liverpool fan just thought it was a done deal. It would have been a done deal, I think, had the old COVID-19 not kicked off and decimated the club's financial plan for the summer. Mm-hmm. But that, look, we do know that the owners, they work within a strict framework. They want Liverpool to be basically self-sustainable, and they don't go outside the lines. And that's just the way it is. So it's a tough one to take. I think the reason it's so difficult to take is because he's gone to Chelsea. You know, if he was going to, say, Bayern Munich, it wouldn't sting as much. But he's going to a team that are building really nicely and look like they are potentially going to be a really good side in the next year or two. You know, they already have some very good young players. So, I suppose you just have to trust the process, as they say, Anto. But it is a difficult one to take at the moment.
Yeah. All right, Neil. So Liverpool fans, we've been counting down for this, praying that the season would get started up again, and because we want to get our hands on this trophy that we haven't got for 30 years. And at the other end of it, you look at Villa. And when it was, I mean, it's all, people are saying, it was never going to be null and voided. There was too much money involved. But I mean, I honestly thought there was a good possibility, and that would have worked out great for Villa. So what are your thoughts about coming back? Because we're all giggly, like we're giggling schoolgirls here, like ready to get cracking and get our hands on a trophy. But you must be a little bit more kind of apprehensive, a little bit worried about what's going to happen over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a strange one. We could certainly do with Timo Werner, and I'm absolutely disappointed he didn't join Villa either as well. So we've got that.
There's always Kylian Mbappe.
It's an absolute travesty, that he would go to a muck club like Chelsea and two big giants like Villa and Liverpool. He turns us down. But we could certainly do with him in the run-in because that's really where we've struggled. And as you mentioned, we are down at the bottom. We're down at the bottom for a reason. And from on the 17th of June, we're going to know our fate, really, because we kick things back off in a game that we never had, I suppose, really, against Sheffield United, and it's must win straight out the blocks. I think if you were to ask 90% of Villa fans, I think that they probably would have said they would have liked to see the season come back, because there's a kind of I suppose a prideful kind of meritocracy to the Premier League, and you don't want to be known as that team that basically should have gone down, and then maybe you might be kind of prolonging your pain for the next year and so on. 22-team league or something crazy happens. You just don't know. It becomes more of a lottery. Now Villa obviously are where we are for a reason. We have actually performed better against the bigger teams at the start of the year, and at the start of the year we didn't get breaks. There's a lot of studies done on VAR and who could have hindered and who could have helped and so on. And Villa don't come out of that very well from a point of view of, big games they turned into 6-pointers with people around them, with teams around them and so on, like that turned into 6-pointers on VAR. So I think I suppose kind of the Villa fans are very they're very colloquial, they're very tribal, and from that point of view, I think they'd like to see Villa roar back and And this is around the time of the year last year that everybody had written us off for getting into a playoff position. We went on 10 games unbeaten, and it really, really kind of buoyed our season and obviously got us back up to the Premier League. I don't think it was ever going to be voided because with anything like this, there's legal eagles and lawyers and everything lurking around every corner. And with Villa not having played the same amount of games as every other team, if they were to void the league and relegate a team like they did with Hearts above in Scotland, there would have been litigation. And likewise, I think if they had voided it, there would have been litigation from the teams occupying the playoff spots in the Championship.
Well, that's right. But the thing is, we had an Everton fan on a few weeks ago, and Everton are kind of, they have exciting times coming up with Ancelotti there. But as for this season, they're not going to get relegated, and they're not really going to qualify for Europe. And we had a Man United fan who's, there's a lot to play for there. But for Villa, I'm just wondering, did the break come at the best possible time? Because I saw them play at Leicester away just before the lockdown, and they were absolutely dreadful. And they've been really unlucky with injuries. I think, McGinn was probably one of the best players in the team. And, once he got injured, a lot of people kind of wrote them off. And then, they've made a couple of emergency signs, like Pepe Reina came in. So in some ways, I mean, the break, obviously we wish that didn't happen because, we've lost 3 months of our lives that we're never going to get back. But do you think that this could be the difference between Villa staying up? Because it wasn't looking good before the break, was it?
No. Our performance, Turgid, you mentioned it. I had that game against Leicester was... we did a preview on it with the Leicester podcast as well, and they were worried for that game, and it turned out they didn't need to be because we could have played 8 players and still came away with the same result. But yes, what it does is, what I think this has done is it's broken our bad streak, as well as it's breaking teams like Sheffield United, like Chelsea, like Wolves, like Newcastle. They were all beginning to get a bit streaky towards the end of the season and get played away into good form. There is no team going to be in good form or bad form after this, because everybody is essentially going to be coming out of the blocks at the same sluggish pace. It's not like there's been a break and everybody could train to the same intensity as they possibly could or get around each other. This is people going to come back and they're going to have to feed their way into it. And it's going to be really interesting to see even the high-end teams. Like obviously, look, Liverpool have a big enough buffer zone. You guys aren't going to be caught, and you're not going to lose league. Yep. But there are other teams there that are in around the top 4. They could coast their way into this, and next thing before you know it, finish 6th or 7th.
Well, this could be let's be honest, this could be the biggest 8 weeks in Sheffield United's history of the football club. Huge. I mean, if they get Champions League football, that is you could say you've never seen anything like that in a team's first season back in the Premiership. I mean, I remember Ipswich. They ran close a couple of years, but we beat them 2 if they ended up in the UEFA Cup. Then you had, I think, Wigan got to a League Cup final in their first, but this would be absolutely unheard of. So, Anto, I just want to ask you a question about Liverpool coming back. Trent Alexander said today, we're not training to come back and just get the job done. We're training to kind of storm this last 9 games or whatever it is. So what do you expect? Obviously, we've never seen Liverpool play behind closed doors before. Well, are you expecting a kind of lethargic, let's just get their hands on the trophy, or do you think Liverpool are going to come out with a point to prove?
Well, look, they can't really come out with the mindset of let's just get enough done. I mean, they're a professional team. They're a fantastic setup, very scientific led in the background. So they're obviously going to come out and try and play the best that they can, but we don't know how they're going to react. Like, as Neil said there, it's interesting because it's a bit of a leveler. You come into the last third of the season and it's usually the teams. This is why the big teams always kind of rise to the top in the home stretch, because they have bigger, better squads. So this is interesting because it throws a spanner in the works in that sense, because everybody's getting a chance to recharge, go again. All these clubs now are effectively going through pre-season again to get this finished, get this season finished. So I don't know how Liverpool are going to be when they come back. We've seen Liverpool come back from breaks, like say mid-winter breaks and things like that, and they've been it's taken them a few games to get going again, to really be the polished, aggressively pace-led team that they can be. Like, it's sometimes they're a little bit rusty looking, so I don't know is the answer, but at the end of the day, like, really it's just about them getting the 2 wins they need, I think it is. And It's really just once they do that, it doesn't. I don't think anybody really cares like
Yeah.
how they finish off the season. It's really just about getting over the line.
Yeah. Well, Neil, your love affair with Villa started with basically through one man and one man only, and it's I'm guessing it's the reason you've named your podcast after him. So I have to say I really do love Paul McGrath for so many reasons. I read his book, and it's honestly probably the best sports autobiography I've ever read in my life. So I just want you to tell us your early memories of Paul McGrath. Why did he leave such a big impression on you? And I think it's generally seen how he's viewed in Ireland at this point, but how is he viewed by the Villa supporters?
Paul McGrath isn't called Paul McGrath around Villa Park, and he's called God. You know, if you walk into Birmingham and you say, you know, I've met God, they will say, how was Paul McGrath? Did you buy him a drink? You know, like, and that's not hyperbole. Like, you know, it's openly spoken about. Even managers call him God. Even ex board members call him God. That's just what he's referred to as. As you say, I did start supporting Aston Villa because of Paul McGrath. It was 92. The 92 season. Villa finished second in the league, and I at the time in RTE used to carry live 3:00 games, and I saw Villa play against, I think it was Crystal Palace, and I wouldn't have been a big football fan at that stage. I was just 6, maybe going on 7, and I saw Paul McGrath. And he was just fantastic. That's literally, it was just, he just stood out. And I remember my dad.
Arguably his peak, isn't it?
Well, yeah, 92 to 96 really would have been his peak when he was at Villa. But I remember my dad was literally cheering for him, you know, at that stage because of just the kind of guy he was. My dad wouldn't have been a football fan at all, but as I started to follow Villa, he started to follow Villa as well. But yeah, it was just like that. I remember, my dad tells me the story, and I can vaguely remember watching the game. But my dad tells me that I turned around to him and I said, "Who's that guy?" And then he goes, "That's Paul McGrath." And then there was an Ireland game on. Then a week later, they were playing some friendly on a Wednesday, and I said, "That's him again. Who does he play for?" And then I remember my dad telling me it was Aston Villa, and then from then on, it's just been a love affair with Villa. But he was just a colossus. Like, you know, the things that he did in an era when football was becoming very commercialized, very I suppose very, very cosmopolitan, I suppose, the world over. Like, you see what Virgil van Dijk is doing now. Paul McGrath was that type of defender. He was just imperious. You couldn't get around him. He was like, he was just a joy to watch. We've seen him play with Ireland. We remember all those games, especially, you know, the Giant Stadium 1994 against Italy. Like, what a game to be able to play that one arm sedated. You know, it's just there was numerous games like that for Villa. And even, you know, looking back and even in games that we lost, he was still a colossus. I know that, you know, we might talk about the 96 FA Cup semi-final. He was aging at that stage and was, you know, on the decline. He was really, really good that day, you know. But he was just, that's what he was. He just didn't care about his body. He didn't care. And lest we forget, this guy didn't train during the week.
Yeah.
He sat on a bike all day, and, you know, that was his thing. He was just a naturally gifted footballer, and just revered around Villa Park, and there's nobody that will have any negative words to say about Paul McGrath.
That's brilliant. And Anto, I mean, Neil kind of answered, you know, I was going to ask him about the Van Dijk comparison. He kind of already got there. He beat me to it. But I saw Paul McGrath on Tommy Tiernan, I think it was, I don't know, maybe 6-8 months ago or whatever. And I found it very emotional because he kind of sees, you know, he's grateful to Ireland for accepting him and for everything that we've done for him. And Tommy turned it around and said, no, we're the ones that are grateful. And, you know, we worship the man, and not just because he played for Ireland. Forget, we're Liverpool supporters. He's an ex-Man United player, but he seems to be just kind of one of these characters. I mean, I think it's really between him and Roy Keane for the greatest Irish player of all time. And for me, I'd have him as number one, just the way he conducts himself off the pitch. But he seems to be someone who kind of just transcends rivalry, doesn't he?
Yeah, and
I think...
Sorry. No, well, I was just going to say that it's a good point. It's a big part of why he's so adored and loved is his personality, his background. I mean, Paul McGrath she was raised in an orphanage. She was a black child in 1970s Ireland. That was a very unusual thing. It was a very difficult upbringing. He's had, he is an alcoholic. He's gone through hell. He has gone through hell. And he played at Manchester United and Aston Villa when his knees were falling apart for the Republic of Ireland. He gave what I think is the greatest individual performance from any Ireland player ever at the Giants Stadium against Italy at USA 94. When he would have been, he was well into his 30s at that stage, and he was just superhuman. But I think why people love him so much is that he's also very human. He's really honest about his problems. He's honest about his addiction and the mistakes that he's made. And he's just a really nice man. Like, he's just a really down-to-earth, lovely man. And so you've got this paradox of a guy who was supremely talented, outrageously gifted footballer, and also flawed, and honest about that. So that combination, I think, is a big part why Paul McGrath is so loved. As you say, it transcends rivalry, because he's just, how can anybody dislike Paul McGrath? He was an amazing footballer, and he is a really good guy as well.
Do you want to know a little bit of trivia as well?
Please.
Later on in life, I found out that my mum is originally from Dublin.
Right.
And you mentioned that Paul McGrath was brought up in an orphanage, and it was close enough to where that orphanage was, where my mum was brought up. So every so often the kids would be allowed to go out and play, and so and they became friendly with a couple of guys who were in the same orphanage as Paul McGrath. But every so often he would come down and play football with them, like when they were 12, 13, 14 and so on. So without even knowing it, my mum was there. She said that I kind of remember, like, look, Colin, he was a black kid in Ireland at that time. There weren't too many children like that, and they're saying he used to always be down there playing football with their mates and stuff like that. So it was just kind of a serendipitous kind of a thing that, like, 20 years later you find out, and then comes out the orphanage he was in, and my mother turns out and goes, that's only around the corner from him. That must have been him. That must have been him playing soccer on the green. Yeah. So
if there was ever a movie to be made about a footballer's life, I know people would say, George Best would be a great one, and I'm sure it would be. But Paul McGrath, it's Charles Dickens stuff. It's incredible, and his son apparently was on the books at Liverpool at one point. So there you go. And listen, I would love to talk about Paul McGrath all day, but you've got a podcast called For the Love of Paul McGrath, so I'll let you do the heavy lifting from here on. So Neil, I want to ask you about Villa fans in general towards Liverpool, because we had a Man United fan on last week, and we didn't need to we don't need to wonder what they think of us. And then before that, we had an Everton fan. But in terms of Villa, how do you find they take to Liverpool fans? I mean, have you ever seen a Liverpool Villa game? Do the fans? Is there any kind of I don't know, general respect there, or how are we taken amongst the Villa fans?
I don't think there's any real animosity between Villa and Liverpool. It's like the clubs are more intertwined than people want to kind of admit, I suppose, in the Villa side of things. I think there's always going to be, your tribal and your local kind of rivalries. And sometimes, when Liverpool are going well, Villa more recently haven't been. And we've often been the whipping boys. Like Robbie Fowler used to just love playing against us and scoring against us. Everybody loves scoring against Villa when they play for Liverpool and so on. So we've been on the end of a couple of drubbings from Liverpool, and more often than not. And I think that just kind of wears people down. But from a kind of a hatred point of view or a rivalry point of view, there's never really been a rivalry. Like, even you go back to the 80s and you see Liverpool and Forest were winning all their European Cups. And then there's Villa in the middle. They're intertwined from that point of view. They've held successes together. You look at the number of League Cups up until recently, until money started to play a bigger factor in it. Villa and Liverpool had won the most League Cups. Little things like that. They've been very successful in pods together, and I think the respect is pretty mutual. There will be times, and you will go on any forum or any Twitter discussion, and you'll hear somebody, say something derogatory about Villa, but the overriding derogatory about Liverpool, but the overriding feeling is that we're kind of working on two different paths at the moment, and there is no real kind of hatred towards it. It's just a case of, okay, we'll see you at the top someday, and then we can have a bit of a rivalry, but until then, there's no real point.
All right. And Anto, you've seen, I was with you for one of them, definitely. What's your kind of memories of watching Villa in the flesh?
Yeah, I think the two games, I've seen Villa a couple of times at Anfield. The game you're referring to was a 1-1 draw, wasn't it? I think, what was that?
Dion Dublin scored that day.
We're going back a bit now. It was probably 2000, 2001.
Would have been 2003.
Okay, 2003. Yeah, they stung us for a deserved draw. So they were. I mean, there's been good Villa teams over the years as well, hasn't there? And they were. Graham Taylor was the manager at the time. I remember he brought them out really early in the second half for their warm up.
Yeah.
Liverpool 1-0 up at half time, and Villa came out 5 or 10 minutes before Liverpool for the second half, and they went through a full warm up, and then started the second half like a rocket, and won a penalty and equalised. It sticks in my head because it was unusual at the time, but I'd never seen a team do that. But my impression is, I mean, I did live in the English Midlands for a few years. I lived in Walsall, which is kind of halfway between Birmingham and Wolverhampton. And so I would have got to know a number of Villa fans. They're great. They are a great club, and they're a great fan base. Really passionate, noisy fans. You know, the few times I've seen them at Anfield, they're good fans, Villa, and it is a great club. Like they won the European Cup. You know, this is a serious club. So
yeah,
I've always had a soft spot for Villa because I did live in that area. Villa Park is a beautiful ground, and it's a ground I think footballers seem to love going to as well. Like,
yeah.
Seem to love playing at Villa Park. So, yeah.
Well, we have me and Anto have a mutual friend who was at Villa Park for a game, and he just said it's an incredible stadium. It's a huge pitch, and just very, very impressive. And it's kind of stadium where no matter where you're sitting, you kind of have a good view of the game. Yeah. Neil, I'm just wondering, can you tell me about the kind of the trials and tribulations of being a Villa supporter from Ireland in terms of getting over there, getting tickets, keeping yourself in the loop? You know, because one of the reasons we set this podcast up is to kind of give an Irish view of supporting an English team from Ireland, and you know, getting the ferry at 4 o'clock in the morning, or looking for a cheap Ryanair flight, or doing the dreaded day trip. So, what's it like for supporting Villa from Ireland?
Yeah, it's like, luckily enough that I suppose some days I when I'm traveling over there, it can be a bit arduous. You know, you get your 6 o'clock flight, you're over in Birmingham for 7 o'clock, and you're walking around the bull ring waiting for something to open up at 8. You know, that kind of way. It's a long day, but it's at times like that though that when you start off on the trip, you find it a bit arduous. But then once you're over there, you're kind of going, thanks be to God I don't follow Burnley or Blackburn, where I might have to fly in and then get a 3-hour bus journey from somewhere.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So, and that's not against Burnley or Blackburn. I'm sure they've got some fantastic towns, but you know, it's good to kind of have it in that kind of the kind of cosmopolitan city centre space. But I'll be honest with you, I used to have a lot of friends that would have flirted with the idea of being Villa fans back in the day as well. You don't tend to see so many Irish Villa fans at the moment, but there still is a good core group, like the Irish Lions Club, the Leinster Lions, the Munster Lions, Paddy Kelly, who does the podcast with me, and Philip Drew, who runs the Leinster Lions. The Leinster Irish Lions Club in Dublin is the biggest Lions club in the world. It's the biggest Aston Villa supporters club in the world. Yeah. So we still have quite a big presence. Getting tickets for games is, you know, it's over the last couple of years, it's been pretty easy to get tickets for games. Since we got back into the Premier League, it's been a small bit more difficult. We've had a few more sellouts, but the guys in the Lions clubs, if you sign up to be part of the supporters clubs, and you know, you pay your dues and stuff like that, and you get on to the operators there, you know, you'll find tickets. They're really accommodating. They can't be any fairer or friendlier with regards to getting tickets. And you know, I know that if I ever wanted a ticket, all I have to do is ask, and the one would appear. You know, and it's
well, me and Anto have been lucky to be on the cop end for a few games, and I always kind of, you know, maybe just out of bitterness and jealousy, I was always like, how good can it be? You know, and then finally when I actually got on the cop, I realized it is incredible. It's just the noise that it's constant. It never stops. Can you tell me, have you ever been in the Holt End, and what's that kind of experience like?
Yeah, don't bring your kids. Is what I would say. That'd be the best. I don't have any kids, and I wasn't a kid when I was brought there. But Yeah, upper Holt, lower Holt are just fantastic. You know, it's there's a lot of folklore around that. Like when it was a standing terrace, it was one of the most formidable places to come. You know, it was literally like the Yellow Wall in Dortmund. And
yeah.
I'm open to correction on this, but I think the Yellow Wall in Dortmund was mimicked on the old Holt End. I'm open to correction on it, but it was a formidable place. Obviously, since safe standing has now been eradicated, maybe soon to be brought back in again. It's become tiered and it's got 2 tiers, but it's still fantastic atmosphere. You know. I remember one game that just stands out. When I was in the Holt, I was in the lower Holt, and I was actually behind the goals halfway up, and we played Sheffield United in 2000, and I'm going to say 2010. Maybe it wasn't. It was 2007. Actually, it was actually the day of the 25th anniversary when we won the European Cup, and it was just that it's just one of those games that sticks out in my mind. We won 3-0. Patrick Berger scored, Ashley Young scored, and God, I can't remember who else scored that day. But just it literally, like, my body was shaking. I remember coming out of it afterwards. When the atmosphere is up there, when it's packed, when Villa are going well, and this was during the Martin O'Neill years where we should have gotten into the Champions League and maybe kicked on, which is all too familiar the story for Aston Villa when we didn't. But when things are going well, that place shakes. It was just such a fantastic day to be in there. It's incredible. It's incredible. The Upper Holt is kind of a diehards area. Put it that way. That's really where you're going to find the dyed-in-the-wool guys.
Well, I wasn't going to bring this man up, but you mentioned him there. And Martin O'Neill. I've always liked Martin O'Neill. I think he doesn't kind of pretend to be something that he's not. I think, you know, when you've got O'Neill, you know you're going to get a certain type of football, and I think he's brought a level of success to almost. I mean, he was Leicester in the 90s were incredible, and brought them up, got them a few League Cups. What he did at Celtic has never really been bettered in my lifetime, in terms of what he did in Europe there, and was very. I thought, you know, he was. You know, I'll argue with people about what happened with Ireland, but I think he's dealing with a very poor squad. So, what's your views, being an Irishman, watching him being the manager of Ireland, and then watching him being the coach of your club team, because he came pretty close to getting top. Well, he at least was challenging for top 4, wasn't he?
Absolutely, it was. Those years were fantastic years. That's the last time we've been relevant, and I know some Aston Villa fans would kill me for saying that, but realistically, that's like we should, like, we could have been where Spurs were for the last few years, you know, with that economic investment, with getting into Europe and you know, being the attraction of players and so on, but it just never happened. We came along when we got money from the States and Randy Lerner during that time, and then Man City just leapfrogged us because they just had more money. Essentially, they could spend their way out of more trouble like we could. But Martin O'Neill, I think no matter where he's gone, he's always been pretty outspoken, pretty headstrong, and a lot of the times in a good way. Players speak really, really fondly of him. Fans do too. You'll find that, like, I speak fondly of Martin O'Neill, not just because he's an Irishman and because he managed our national team, but what he did for the team was brilliant. We started to go through boardroom upheaval. Our chairman at the time, Randy Lerner, was going through a wicked divorce with his spouse at the time, and cut the money going, and essentially with straw that broke the camel's back is another Irish connection, and it's Stephen Ireland. Martin O'Neill didn't want to bring him in as part of the James Milner deal, and he was brought in, and then he never got money to replace James Milner for who he actually wanted to replace him with, and then Martin O'Neill left. The souring of the apples, though, is where he left like 4 days, I think it was, before the season was supposed to start. So he really left Villa up the creek without a paddle, and that's the one that kind of sticks. He could have left at a better time and gotten out and been a hero, but the way that he left, the club were able to spin it at the time, because essentially that's all they were able to do was spin it at the time. And he kind of soured relationships, I think. But for me, just fantastic years, and he was a great manager.
Okay, well, we're gonna talk about some classic Villa Liverpool encounters, but first, I'm probably wrong in this, but I know when O'Neill left, not long after, an ex-Liverpool manager came in, Gerard Houllier.
Yep.
And there was a lot of doubts about could he do it, because, you know, it ended so badly at Liverpool, and we've always said that if he had left after his heart problem, he would have been considered a legend. Well, I mean, he is a legend in his own right, but it did turn sour towards the end. He went off to have success with Lyon. What did you think? I'm going to ask Anto in a second for his thoughts on what happened with Houllier in the last later days of his Liverpool career. But what did you make of Houllier? Did you think he wasn't given the right tools, the right players, or was he just never the right man in the first place?
Interesting you say he wasn't given the right tools to the right players. The players hated him. The players didn't like him at all. He came in there and the players immediately rubbed them all up the wrong way. And Richard Dunn speaks very eloquently, but he speaks very kind of disdainfully about Houllier. And he mentioned it that even after, like, Houllier just held such a grudge against a lot of those Villa players that after Henry's hand of Henry, or whatever you want to call it, for France that time, the Houllier actually goaded Houllier. That happened beforehand. Sorry, should I say? And then that Houllier actually goaded Dunn about that during sessions and stuff like that. Yeah, Dunn doesn't speak very, very highly about him at all. But he had some health issues as well during his Villa time, and had to go on quote unquote gardening leave. And then Gary McAllister, another Liverpool connection, comes in and guided us to safety that year somehow. Because we just weren't firing. That was a year of upheaval and we couldn't get anything right. And that was the start of the slide, really. But Gerard Houllier would not go down in great stead at Villa. And it's interesting because apparently he was brought in, and this is rumour and conjecture, and there's nothing to back this up other than message board stuff. But apparently Red Bull were supposed to be floating around Villa at that time, and they wanted him in. Villa heard him, and then the sale never went through. But whether that's true, we will never ever find out.
All right. Well, we're gonna move on from this segment in a minute. Last question is for Anto. And I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but Anto, Gerard Houllier, legendary Liverpool manager, or just a very, very good manager?
That is a good question, because when you say legendary Liverpool manager, then you're putting him in very esteemed company. I think he probably does deserve to be in that bracket, because to deliver the 3 trophies that he did, don't forget, Bill Shankly didn't win a European Cup. If you're judging it by silverware, and I think there is a famous flag that you see on the cup that has all Shankly and all the other Liverpool European Cup winning managers on it, isn't there? And it's often been said that Gerard Houllier should be on that flag. I mean, he won a UEFA Cup, a really high standard UEFA Cup, by the way.
Yeah.
3 trophies in one season. Dragged the club into the 21st century in a lot of ways. Improved the training ground. Weeded out players who lacked the discipline and hunger to play for Liverpool. And, in fairness, laying the foundations for the team that went on to win the Champions League under Benitez in 2005. So I think there's a strong case for him to be to get that sort of status. I think it definitely, the last 2 years soured. He wasn't the same manager when he came back. The man nearly died in the dressing room. He just didn't quite have the same conviction. And he made some bad signings. And, Neil touches on there. It's funny, like, so much depends on timing for things often in football. Like, when Houllier came into Liverpool, they wanted a total upheaval. They wanted a disciplinary in him. They allowed him to completely change his panel. So he was able to make, I think in his first summer, did he make 6-7 signings? Totally molded the team in his own image, where he didn't have that luxury at Aston Villa. He went in and he probably tried to do things his own way. And as Neil says there, the players weren't receptive to it and they revolted. And that can happen. Yeah. But certainly Liverpool as a club got the best of him, and they are indebted to him for a lot. He did a lot of good things.
Yeah, I think as Neil Ruddock will tell you, it's the Houllier way or it's the Hoy way. Either like him or you hate him. All right, lads, that's brilliant. So we're going to talk about some classic games. Classic for one of us, kind of forgettable for the other one. And we're going to start with 1996. I'll go to you first on this one, Anto. It's at Old Trafford. Villa have, and in hindsight, now when I look back, it was they did us a real favour because Villa had won the League Cup against Leeds not too long before. I think they won it the week before. And I remember we were just saying they're going to take their eyes off the prize here. And this is peak Robbie Fowler at Old Trafford. What are your memories of that game, Anto? Because that that basically, the 2 goals that Fowler scores that day shows, kind of encapsulate everything that he was about at the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the two of them are a brilliant header and a fantastic body. My memories of the game are that I didn't see the game. I can clearly remember not seeing the game. Yeah, it was it like maybe my memory's playing tricks on me here, but was it a Sunday lunchtime kickoff?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is like, you're going back 24 years, so like it was just harder to watch football. We didn't have Sky Sports, and it would have been very unusual to be brought to a pub at that time. See, I just remember missing the game because I got the result, of course, and 3-0 win. It sounds like it was a stroll in the park, which of course it wasn't.
No.
When you look back at the game and having looked back at the highlights, Villa had their chances. It was just one of those days for Liverpool where Fowler was on fire. The first goal was everything, and then they popped them on the break. I think McAteer got the 3rd goal. So
yeah.
When I look back on that game now, because I went and watched extended highlights of that match pretty recently, and actually Liverpool sort of really took their season started to tail off from that point. They started to they really celebrated that win, which is fair enough. But when you look back and knowing what you know now, they just didn't have the mentality to kick on and win that cup. The season drifted. They spent the week before the FA Cup final, I think 5 days before the final, they all went to the races. Like they were drinking at Aintree, they wore the white suits. So although it was a great win and a real high point actually of that era, when you look at it now, it was sort of indicative of Liverpool to do that, to beat Aston Villa, who were a decent side at the time.
Yeah.
And just sort of like flakily peter out and then lose the final.
And from the other side of it, Neil, that year, Robbie Fowler, he demolished Villa on his own most seasons, but he scored Liverpool a very, very infamous game from that. I think it maybe was about a month before, where it was at Anfield. But Liverpool were 3-0 up after 8 minutes, and Robbie Fowler scored an absolute beauty where he Cruyff turned past Steve Staunton, buried it in the Kop, and then he scored at Villa Park in the away game, and then he scores those 2 goals in the semi-final. So what are your memories of, because some people who are maybe listening to this, it's mad to think, because and like I said, 24 years ago, but some people probably don't remember watching maybe they first got into Liverpool a few years later. So what are your kind of memories of watching Fowler as an opposing fan around that time?
I remember when he broke onto the scene, and it was Fowler and Rush up front, and like you guys mentioned there, Sky Sports wasn't really a thing, didn't have it, had to go to the pub to watch it. My parents weren't really pub goers and such, so I had to kind of pick my time when I visited friends that had Sky Sports, and I became friends with a lot of people who had Sky Sports over that period of time. But Fowler was just majestic. He was a Liverpool kid, brought up in Toxteth, I think it was. So he had all the motivation in the world to go on and be really, really great for that club, and he absolutely was. Such a great finisher. Didn't have as good an English career as he should have.
Mm-hmm.
But like his early days he was unstoppable. Probably the best young striker in the world. Well, there was no probably. He was the best young striker in the world until maybe. The larger Ronaldo came along, I think, a few seasons later, but he was outstanding. Like that game, those 2 goals he scored, that header was absolutely outrageous in that semi-final. The volley, what was he doing there? What was he doing in that position in the box?
It's almost like some sort of like that movie Looper, or some sort of time travel movie where he has watched the play happen before, because. Mm-hmm. It's a weird for your central striker. He's Liverpool's number 9. The cross comes in. I'm talking about the second goal that he gets. The cross comes in, and I don't think he even attacks it. He quickly kind of backtracks out to the edge of the box, as if, and to backtrack is one thing, but he goes to a very specific part of the box where it's as if he's time traveled from like 20 seconds in the future, and he knows exactly what's going to happen. And then when the ball comes to him, it's one thing to know it's going to come, but it's not as if he's clean through on goal. Then he has to take it down, and as soon as he hits it, it's in from the second, and it's one of those things as well where the goal, it benefits from the camera being right behind him. Like you can see it, you can soon, and he doesn't even hit it with pace. It's all about, and it's the old thing. A goal just looks better when it goes in off the post or the bar. But yeah, I mean, I can't really add too much to what you said about Fowler there. Absolutely a wonderful player.
He did this to tell you the kind of, I suppose, really what a lot of what I remember about that game as well, and about him as the player was, it was on a Sunday. You are correct, because I remember I went into school the next day, and one of my mates who was a Villa fan came running out to the gates as I was walking in and goes, the Villa are going to be in the well, he was 2 years older than me. Villa are going to be in the FA Cup final. And I went, how? They lost 3-0 yesterday. No. All the Liverpool players were caught being on drugs. And I was there, yes. So for about an hour, I believed him. And then I realised that it was the 1st of April. So it was the 31st of March they played Liverpool and Liverpool played. And then the 1st of April, I was running.
In fairness, that's one. Or if you had read about that Liverpool team around there, that's not the most ludicrous April Fool's prank. All right, well, we can't just sit here and talk about the good old days for Liverpool. We have to talk about some of the bad days as well. And I'm going to fast forward now to, I think it's 2015, and it's at Wembley. And I'll start off with you first, Andrew, get the ball rolling here. I'll just simply say, is this in our lifetime the worst? And there's been a few. Is this the worst ever Liverpool display at Wembley that you've seen from Liverpool?
Oh, yeah, it probably is, actually. It probably is. I never really thought about it like that. But listen, that was that Rodgers team had lost all momentum. The wheels were coming off. Like they had gone so close to winning the Premier League in 2014, and in that summer they went backwards because they lost Luis Suarez, and the replacements they brought in were just woefully. They were inept. Balotelli and Ricky Lambert, and I think Markovic came in. So the whole thing about that FA Cup run was that they were trying to win it for Gerrard, wasn't that it? It was his last.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
it was the whole thing of like, we're going to win it for Steven Gerrard, and it would be the perfect send off, and so the league had sort of gone by the wayside. But that was the thing that Liverpool fans and Rodgers himself was holding on to, was we still got this cup, and I think Liverpool were quite well fancied to win that cup.
Yeah.
But on the day, they were absolutely dreadful, deservedly beaten by, in all fairness, not what you'd call a vintage Villa. I mean, Villa were pretty average, weren't they?
Well, you saw what happened to Villa in the final.
Yeah. So, yeah, bad day at the office, Anton. I think you're right. I think it actually is the worst Wembley performance they've torn.
Neil, maybe I'm just remembering this wrong, but is that the Jack Grealish final? Because I remember Liverpool just couldn't live with him that day.
That was his coming of age, without a shadow of a doubt. Like, this kid, Villa knew about this kid, and people have been clamoring for him to be given chances back in 2013 when he was scrawny that day. He was really chicken legs the day, back in 2013, and he went on loan to Notts County and so on, and then he made his way up. But Sherwood took a chance on him. But that day, I remember watching it, he ran the show from midfield. He played a lot deeper, actually, which is something that Villa fans are now actually critical of him, playing deeper. He actually more or less played almost like, and look, once again, not making comparisons here or being hyperbolic, but he was like that. He was like Andre Pirlo, played back kind of in front of the back four and sprayed it around and moved with it. And his movement was fantastic that day, himself and Delph. But it was kind of his coming of age. People got to see him on the big stage, and he kind of got mouths moving. But that was almost an anomaly. That was a Tim Sherwood performance. We had Tiger Tim over us at the time. God, that seems like almost three lifetimes ago.
What's the story with Grealish? Is he the real deal? Because I like the look of him. I do like the look of him, and I think England in general is crying out for a player like that. He looks in the mould of David Silva, or the English comparison would be a very, very young Joe Cole, like where he constantly wants the ball. He's very busy looking. He's always wants to beat players. He's looking for a through ball. Is he the real deal? He looks like a bit of a scallywag off the pitch, and he's kind of. I think he basically said in the media this season, like, if we go down, I'm probably not going to be here. Or I think he said if we didn't go up last year, I would have been off. So you can't imagine, even though he's a Villa boy, born and bred, he's a captain, he's going to be around forever. So where are we supposed to like believe the hype about this lad?
Yeah, this guy's good. This guy's really good. Whether he reaches his potential or not is a different story. But this guy is lights out good when he's good, and he's good more often than not. He's carried this team. He's got absolutely nothing to work. He's had nothing to work with up front this year. Last year, like in the championship, it was almost unfair. He gets labelled as a diver, which is absolutely crazy. You just got to watch games. He just gets kicked from pillar to post, and that's one of the things. Like the media dislike him. Maybe fairly because of that photo from Tenerife, but he hasn't really done much wrong. I think the English media jumped on the Irish media bandwagon when he switched allegiances back to the UK, back to England again, and they kind of went, yeah, just easy to hate him. We'll send papers in Ireland. So, and there's been bits and pieces like that. He's never actually fully came out and said that he was going to leave Villa. He's like, he won't leave. I don't think that. Sorry, I was going to say he won't leave Villa. That's a very silly thing to say. But I don't. If the choice was ever his, he wouldn't leave Villa if the team were progressing. But I see an awful lot of, like Gareth Bale was 23, 24 when he started to actually make waves. And Jack Grealish, you mentioned he's a bit like Joe Cole. I don't know, is that David Silva? Yes, maybe, but he's.
I'm talking young Joe Cole, by the way. I'm not talking about at Liverpool picking up 120 grand, constantly out of breath.
Or Villa.
Yeah,
Villa. Another intertwining.
So
I'd love to see him go to Dortmund or something like that if he was to leave. I think if he went on the continent, he'd be absolutely outrageous.
Well, I think we can all agree he probably will move on. So, Anto, would you take him, because we've never actually replaced Coutinho? You've got Lallana and Shaqiri playing that playmaker role, and him being English, he can add an extra 30 million onto his fee. So would you like Liverpool to be in that conversation? Because it could be a conversation that happens soon, depending on what happens with Villa this season.
Yeah, I think Neil is spot on. He will move, because not because of anything against Aston Villa. It's purely, it will be a clinical decision to progress his career, because he's too good to be at a team that are just about keeping their head above water in the Premier League, or and that's why all the top clubs are looking at him. Would I take him for Liverpool? I don't know, because, as you say, the fact that he's English is going to bump up that price tag considerably, and there's probably similar players around now who are around his level. And these days, you'd have to believe that Liverpool or any of the top clubs are aware of those players. So there's probably better value out there. And I don't think Liverpool will seriously be in from. I think Manchester United certainly could be. And I think he could be a really good fit for them, because I agree with Neil. I mean, there's a reason why Ireland fans are so really angry about him. When he did go back to England, obviously, aside from
the kind of player that Ireland are crying out for.
Well, it's because he's so good, Anto. This kid, he is a really talented footballer. He really is. And he is a little bit different, just in the fact that he barely wears shin pads, and his hair is a bit mad. He's a little bit flamboyant in that sense, and that kind of marks you out sometimes.
He's cocky as well, though, isn't he?
A little bit cocky, and he backs himself. So, when you stand out like that, you can be a bit divisive. But I have to say, I do like, as a player, I do like watching Jack Grealish. He's a really good footballer.
All right, well, we talked about the two semis. Let's talk about now one of my favourite Premiership games ever. And it only happened a few months ago. Liverpool are playing Villa away. We're 1-0 down, and Villa deservedly in front. And then Bobby Firmino scores a perfectly good equaliser. But thank God we have VAR, and they show us it's a perfectly good equaliser. Yet still, Martin Atkinson decides to not give the goal. So as the game progresses, it really does look like Liverpool are out of ideas. Villa desperately need these 3 points. Meanwhile, Man City have turned around a 1-0 deficit. They're 2-1 up, and it's a big, big moment, because Liverpool are playing Man City a week later. Andy Robertson scores with about 2 minutes to go. And Anto, what happens in stoppage time?
What happens is that the season, the whole dynamic of the season shifts in those few minutes. Liverpool were poor, didn't look like getting a goal. They got 2 goals and they win the game just by, just suddenly finding another gear. And it then makes the following week, rather than that feeling of City are coming up the hill. Now it's another chance for Liverpool to leave them in their wake, which they do, and they never look back. It actually is that game changes the season from a Liverpool perspective, and probably from a Villa perspective, because they played really well that day. They really troubled Liverpool, and they looked like they'd got it right. To have beaten Liverpool then, to take the scalp of the European champions, that's something that kicks you on. I mean, you can really propel. I mean, the confidence it gives you, but it goes the other way, and suddenly that confidence is shattered. And I think Villa, it wasn't the last time that they did that. It follows them.
Arsenal, I think.
Yeah, Arsenal is the one.
That same thing happened at Arsenal, yeah.
That really gets into your head when you give up a lead like that, because no matter how well you're playing, you're 1-0 up and you enter the last 10 minutes, 15, you start to doubt yourself. And you go, geez, we're going to do this again, which they have done. So that was a huge few minutes and a huge game for both of them teams.
And Neil, it turned our season around because we never looked back. Well, what did it do for Villa though? Because, like I said, Villa did not deserve to lose that day. I would think I would safe to say I think Liverpool maybe deserved a draw. But what did that do? Did you watch the game? Did you see that coming? Yeah. And I'm just for entertainment value. Can you tell me how you felt when Mane scored that?
And this is going to make me sound like a bit of a pillock, but when Jonathan Kodjia came on, I thought it was a strange substitution. A lot of Villa fans like to row in on Dean Smith substitutions, lack of substitutions, and then when he does make a substitution, there's still an issue with it for some fans. I actually really, really like Dean Smith, but at this moment in time, I didn't like Jonathan Kodjia come on, and Jonathan Kodjia is 6'2", 6'3", and Mane isn't. And they were marking each other at a corner, and Mane put his head in the ball, and Kodjia didn't have the balls to do it and went to kick it. If Mane doesn't hit that into the back of the net, VAR would most likely have given a penalty. Like, he kicks him square in the face. Yeah. So, I think it would have been a penalty. But the crux of the matter is that, like you mentioned, Villa had come off games whereby they'd been playing against Spurs. They've been playing really well against Spurs. Last 10 minutes, dropped the ball and ended up losing. It happened against Arsenal, happened against Liverpool. It just happened an awful lot during the course of the year. I think it happened against Burnley as well. And that sticks in the back of your craw. Also, the fact that Liverpool were unbeaten, and it was a case of let's take the Invincibles tag away from the European champions, as you meant. That would be absolutely fantastic. And us at Villa, we love to say, if we beat the European champions, that makes us the champions of Europe. So that was probably something that was going around some of the players' minds. But devastating. Like, most of my mates are Liverpool fans. I turned off my phone and I said, I left a load of groups for 24 hours and I said, no way am I putting up with that.
So Neil, you've seen us at our kind of devastating kind of, I don't want to say at our best, we definitely went on our best that day, but we looked like champions, if you know what I mean. That's what Ferguson's teams did for 15 years or so. Yeah. So how would you assess, looking from the outside at Liverpool at the moment, 25 points clear? I mean, obviously this is the best we've ever had in me and Anto in our lifetimes, but what do you think looking as a neutral at Liverpool, where do you think we can possibly go with this team and this manager?
I think the manager is very important. I think the manager, this is the right manager for the right team. Comes along every 10, 15, 20 years. Arsene Wenger was the right manager for Arsenal at that period of time. Yeah. Obviously, you need to get longevity out of Klopp. So basically, if I'm John Henry and whoever else is running the board there, I'm giving him what he wants. And when we started the podcast, we were talking about, they want to be self-sufficient. They don't want to play over the odds for Timo Werner. That might mean that they might lose out on players like Grealish, who will likely command 60, 70 million pound fee. Villa aren't going to let him go for anything less. And, I would give him whatever he wants, because he gets, I hate saying this phrase, but he gets the club, he gets the fan base, he gets the ethos of it. And he's a bloody good manager too, as well. Liverpool need I think they need to bring in another striker. And, you need to kind of solidify the coverage that you have at centre halves, because I know you've got Dejan Lovren and stuff like that, but Joe Gomez is quite good. I'd gladly take him off your hands if you were going to get a better replacement for him. But, there are bits and pieces there within that team. Where can you guys go? I know you won the European Cup last year. I don't see any reason why it couldn't become you guys couldn't become a powerhouse, provided, as I say, that Jurgen Klopp gets what he needs. And he's not a manager that just wants to go out and spend 200 million and buy Kylian Mbappe and Ronaldo. Like, he doesn't want to do that. He wants to get players that he can nurture, that he can throw the arm around, and he almost likes that challenge.
Well, we're gonna move on to a segment in a minute where we talk about players that have played for both clubs. But I just want to hear your thoughts, Neil, on the Villa Birmingham derby and how it compares to the Merseyside, because I think I've watched a good few of them, and they're never a good game for the neutral because they're so the both players so desperately don't want to, and they could maybe say the same with the last few Merseyside derbies. It seems like one of the most vicious derbies in England and the most hated. There's no respect whatsoever between the two clubs. First of all, am I right with that? And second of all, where did all this hatred? What's it based on?
Yes, you are right. It's a vicious. It's not a rivalry. It's a war. It's vicious. You can't. You just cannot be. If you're a known Villa fan, even outside of the game and stuff like that, it becomes so tribal that stuff happens. In the street and stuff. It's a vicious game. All Bears goes back years and years and years. I don't know the exact origins of it, but it's just always been there. There's some really, really good, I don't know what you call them good, but there's some really factful and interesting reads about football hooliganism in the Midlands. And I remember I read one book just to see if I could get to the bottom of it. And there was some crazy characters around at the time. I mean, like, crazy characters. They have their Zulus and the villains obviously had their ultras, but it's essentially a cross-city divide. That's really what it is. I know that
it hit a low point though with the Grealish punch though. I mean it's hit a low point there, hasn't it?
It hit a low point with that. It hit a low point when they came into the field and they go to Peter Enckelman when he let it through his feet. Look, I'm biased here. They're like, I've no problem in saying that when you get in, when you start talking about football rivalries and stuff like that, they just ain't nice people to be around. When we're talking about Villa and Birmingham, the hatred comes from that. Like it's essentially.
Have you ever got tickets for one of them?
I've never been to Blues Villa Derby. No, I've never been, but I've been in pubs that maybe I've walked into by mistake and gotten quite a grilling off their fans. And when I say grilling, that's putting it mildly.
You weren't wearing the colours, were you?
But might have had a Villa jacket on. They had a Villa badge on at one time, and I was politely asked to leave.
Jesus.
But that was my own naivety. That was when I first started going over. But what it is. It's essentially, should I say, a historically good club in the area against a historically not good club. And Birmingham have not been good. They've won nothing. They're a too big club. They really are. The history speaks for itself, and it's just everybody's fault other than theirs.
Well, listen, I'm not just saying this, but I despise Birmingham. I don't as a football club. I've never been to the city. I can't stand the club though. They seem to can't be able to ever fill that stadium as well. They don't belong in the Premiership, and if they got relegated down to the second division, that'll be okay with me. All right, we're going to move on to our last segment, and this is going to be where we're talking about players who played for both clubs. So we're going to start. We're going to go in some sort of chronological order here. I'm going to start with you, Anto. Fair to say we didn't see. We were too. We were too young to see Steve Staunto in his prime at either Villa or Liverpool. What are your memories of Steve? Because he had two spells with Liverpool. What are your kind of memories of Staunto?
He was a very good player. I don't know about that. Like I remember Steve Staunton in the early 90s playing for Ireland more so than Villa. But I think it's sort of accepted that he was moved on too early. One of a number of Liverpool players who was moved on by Graham Souness too early, and that was to Aston Villa's benefit. They came close. They came pretty close to winning the league under Atkinson in, was it 90? Neil will tell me this, was 92 or 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
92 Graham Taylor,
that was a really good side. When he came to Liverpool, then, you know, he's in the twilight of his career, and he sort of came more as a versatility player at that time. You know, I think he played a lot at centre half, and he didn't quite have the same burst of pace. He used to be able to get up and down the wing. He was a very balanced footballer, nice footballer. No, he was a good player. So I suppose
it was all left foot.
Yeah, of course. But he gave you a bit of balance. And look, as I said, it's more fresher in our heads his later days, which, you know, he wasn't a very sexy footballer then. Let's put it like that. He was a bit of he was a meat and two veg man. Like he did a job, but he rarely stood out. But he was a good pro. I think even in the second stint, he did a job for Liverpool at that time.
Neil, Steve Staunton, Villa legend in any way?
Yeah,
what a great goal at Old Trafford. I remember that one.
He absolutely did. He scored from a corner for Villa. That has to have points in legendary points. But no, he would be, if, like, at the moment on our podcast we're doing the best players of my lifetime. Paddy, my co-host, he's slightly older than me. But we decided to cap it off since 1985 when I was born. We're doing the best players in each position, and Staunton was by far and away left back. He's actually Paddy's favourite ever Aston Villa player. He named his son after him, and Paddy actually. This is interesting. Paddy used to follow Liverpool when Liverpool sold Staunton to Villa. He then started following Villa and has followed them ever since. You know, so there's the connection in that one. He's absolutely diehard. He's his favorite Villa player of all time. So yeah, but look, left back. Steve Staunton, he was fantastic for Villa. He was synonymous with that. I suppose. There was a back four of Earl Barrett, McGrath, and Steve Staunton, and you know they were just absolutely fantastic. Sean Teal, as well, was in there, and they were just fantastic in the early 90s. An interesting fact about Steve Staunton as well. This is one for you to wow your mates with down the pub. He's the only player to play in every Irish World Cup game.
Wow, now that is impressive.
That's a good stat.
Paddy told me that one. I had blew my mind.
Wow, and you forget like how good he played, how well he played in 2002 when his kind of career was going to come to the end. All right, we're going to go to the next player on our list here, and I love this man. I don't know. I think we may. I mean, well, okay, Nottingham Forest got the best out of him, but we got a pretty good year out of him as well. I'll start with. I'll tell you what. I'll start with Anto Forrest. Anto, Mr. Stanley Collymore.
Yeah, I think me and you we have split opinions on this. I'm not so hot on Stan. Like when Collymore came to Liverpool, I loved him and I wanted him so badly to be brilliant, to the point that, and this is a sort of, you know, I was a kid, so it was a childhood perspective, but you know, when Liverpool, if they'd won and you check the scores and you'd see Fowler in that period, I'd always be a little bit sort of disappointed. I wanted Collymore to get goals. I wanted him to be great, and he was a blockbuster move. You know, at that time, £8.5 million.
Yeah.
Now, this was a big thing, and in my opinion, he was there for 2 years, and I think he was a disappointment. Like he was so talented. Roy Evans gets laughed for this. I mean, people can sneer at it, but Roy Evans has said that he felt he had as much raw ability as Ronaldo. Now that might sound a bit silly when you see what way the two players' careers went, but you can kind of see what he's getting at, because he had similar power, pace, 2-footed. He just didn't. In the end, he just didn't have the mentality. He had problems. I think he's come out and said he suffered from depression, and he never moved to Liverpool. You know, when you think he went for all that money, he was on a big salary. He didn't actually move to the city, so he was often late for training and stuff like that.
So if you're disappointed, and bearing in mind that he scored 50 goals alongside, like 50 goals in partnership with Robbie Fowler.
I didn't realize he scored that many goals. I'll be honest, I didn't know.
Well, I mean, if you're disappointed with that, then Neil, I can't imagine how you feel about Collymore, because I think he's a lifelong Villa fan, and he travelled from Birmingham every day to Liverpool's training ground. What are your kind of memories of Stanley?
It's so polarizing. Once again, it's what we expected and what we got, I think, are the two things with Stanley Victor, was what we call him. but he is like all the talent in the world. I actually do kind of agree with the raw talent that he had during those times when he played with Forest, Liverpool, and at times for Villa, but his mental struggles really came in when he did move to Liverpool. Fame and fortune and grabbing the headlines for wrong reasons and so on like that. As that time began to progress, the overarching memory you'll have of Collymore is, as I said, not reaching his potential at Villa, but he scored one of the great goals, one of the few goals that I actually injured myself when I watched against Atletico Madrid in the UEFA Cup. I think it was quarter-final, and the game wasn't going our way, and then he scored an absolute belter, just bells it into the corner.
That's what he did.
That's what. Yeah, he's all, as I said, he had all the talent in the world. Maybe the application just wasn't there. But I remember I jumped up off the chair and I fell down and I ended up breaking 3 toes.
It was worth it. It was worth it.
I was only a kid as well. So.
The next stat on the list is I have made a career out of myself, out of putting this guy down, and I will never stop. I don't like him. I think he's cost us many a trophy, and that man is David James. Neil Dunworth, if you please, tell me, because he went to Villa. He went after us putting up with his shenanigans for about 7 years. He went to Villa and got them to he'd get them to an FA Cup final, but they found themselves in an FA Cup final. And 4 years after making a ridiculous mistake from a set piece that cost Liverpool an FA Cup final, he goes and does the same. So can you tell me, other than that, did he have a very solid Villa career? Was he just as much of a clown as he was with us? Thoughts on David James?
Complete opposite, model professional at Villa. And bar that's the only bad thing I would have to say about David James at Aston Villa was the dropping of the ball for Di Matteo. The FA Cup final, for Di Matteo. Fantastic, I was sad to see him leave. Villa have this history of picking up goalkeepers for next to nothing and turning around their careers or making them really solid. And David James was just that. He was a real calming influence there. At the time when the club was kind of treading water, but like genuinely, I have nothing bad to say about David James at all from his time with Villa. Short and all as it was, but he did move on pretty quickly.
All right, Anto, we'll make this the last one before we come back from another break. You've got 6 minutes. David James.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting Neil saying that, described him in such glowing terms there. Like when he was at Liverpool, some goalkeepers are like this. This is why it is. It's a very difficult position, and it's very hard to be a goalkeeper at a club like one of the top clubs, because the biggest thing and the thing that sets them out, because there's a lot of good goalkeepers around, and David James had more ability than most of them. I mean, as an athlete, as a shot stopper, he was unbelievable, and that goes for Liverpool as well. He was capable of making unbelievable saves. But the biggest thing is concentration, because Liverpool, particularly in the era he was there, they were a possession-based team. They would dominate a lot of games. And so your goalkeeper would go an hour without doing anything. And I think David James found that part of the game very difficult, really difficult. He would switch off, daydream, and that would lead to stupid mistakes. And I think when he went to Aston Villa, and then he went on to Portsmouth, didn't he?
Man City, I think.
Man City, and then he went to Portsmouth.
West Ham, I think, as well.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
They were clubs, like, nothing against those clubs, but like he would have been kept busier. Those teams maybe weren't quite strong. So, and that suited him. I don't think it's a coincidence that he got better as he got older, because he went to clubs where he was more involved in the game. He'd have to do more, and that can suit certain goalkeepers. I think if you see Liverpool at the moment, Alisson, like the thing about Alisson is his concentration levels they're unbelievable. His position, his awareness. He can go an hour without doing something, and then suddenly make a world-class save out of nowhere. That's the difference. So that's, I think, what he struggled with the most at Liverpool. He drove me bananas at, though. I hold him. I more than any player in that era between 95 and say 98, when I think Liverpool should have won the league. Yeah. He's one that I would hold most comfortable, or certainly he's up there, because he made crucial mistakes at crucial times, and that kills you, and it killed us.
I agree with me. Okay, so the next player on this list, I'm going to start with Anto on this one because he was doing something right at Villa if he got the move in the first place. And I was just never impressed from the get-go. That man is Stuart Downing.
Yeah, I think he was a little bit unlucky at Liverpool. Like he made, I think he didn't. His first season, he had that stat where he didn't make an assist. He didn't score. He didn't make an assist. Am I remember that right? So, like, in all fairness, like he was making chances for Andy Carroll must have missed about half a dozen absolute sitters that Downing put on a plate.
That's true.
He was a little bit unfortunate, and I still, I do think that he proved himself to be a good footballer. Both before and after the move to Liverpool, it just didn't work out. You know, that happens. It happens. Like I would put.
He was a victim of that price tag as well, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. But like, I mean, that's part of it. You know, you get that big move, you got to deal with that. Some players are able to, and some aren't. And he probably just fell below that bracket of being a player who could excel at one of the bigger clubs. You know, it's not easy. Like, you know, you go with that expectation. There's more pressure, and you see it a lot. You know, it's maybe something that we don't think about. Like guys having to make that step in their lives and physically move house, and all of a sudden they're in a new environment. And there's a lot more pressure and spotlight on them, and it's some of them can handle it, some of them can't. I just think he was a character, a personality that couldn't handle it, and he has actually spoken recently enough about that. You know, the pressure and the extra spotlight of being at Liverpool. He found that difficult. You know, which is telling. Which is, if he's coming out and saying that, then that probably tells you that he probably mentally he wasn't quite cut out to deal with it. You know, so that's a big part. That is a big part of it when you get a move like that.
Neil, Jamie Carragher said that he could imagine Downing getting at least 15 to 20 assists in the season, supplying for Andy Carroll all day long. It didn't work out that way, obviously. What happened there? Because I can't remember anything. I remember him being a very promising player from Middlesbrough before Villa, and I can't remember anything from his Villa career. So can you fill us in? What was he turning water into wine? When he was there, or what was going on?
Downing was really, really solid at Villa. He formed a midfield. We had a fantastic midfield four at that stage. We had Gareth Barry and Milner in midfield. In the central midfield, and then we had Downing and Ashley Young on the wings. So that in across any team in the league at that stage was a brilliant midfield. He scored 9 goals for Villa, and I think the biggest problem was that his
last ever goal, by the way, was against the winning goal against Liverpool, which I honestly believe was one of the reasons we signed them.
And that would be one of the reasons a lot of Villa players have been signed in the past is because they played well against Villa. But down, his delivery from set pieces was brilliant. He was a very, very good, like a very good solid player. We've a podcast coming up later with regards to best right wingers, and he's going to be in the conversation of my time. But as I say, he was one of these players we couldn't afford to lose at that period of time. We'd lost Ashley Young. Gareth Barry was gone. Milner was on his way as well, if not gone, I think, at that stage. Actually, he was gone at that stage. But, one of these players as well that got caught up in the post-Martin O'Neill apocalypse that happened at Aston Villa. That affected an awful lot of players. And it affected an awful lot of players' futures with Aston Villa. And I think Stuart Downing at that stage wanted out. Alex McLeish came in, and he uttered the immortal word saying that he wouldn't leave. And then I think it was something like 12 days later he was after signing for Liverpool. But I think he blotted his copybook Downing with a lot of fans because he posed with a Liverpool scarf when he was out on holidays as well. And that was kind of when the writing was on the wall. So Villa fans will think down upon him, but he was quite a productive player for Villa.
Okay, well, this is the last player on the list, and I'm going to get the ball rolling with this guy first because I think I'm the only man who can defend his Liverpool career. And he looked genuinely like one of the best strikers in the Premiership when we signed him. His career has never recovered since. I'm sure you can guess who I'm talking about. Christian Benteke. signed by, we don't actually know who signed them, because this was when the transfer committee was pulling the strings at Anfield, and players were coming in that Rodgers clearly, some of them he signed, some of the, I don't think Rodgers signed Firmino, hence why he couldn't get the best out of him, was playing him on the wing. And Benteke, I think, was a Rodgers signing though. I think I think Rodgers was trying to reinvent Liverpool after the disaster that was the year before. And it just wasn't working out. But he was still scoring the odd goal. He scored the winner against Bournemouth on his home debut. He scored the last-minute equaliser against Chelsea at Anfield. He scored the winner against Leicester. He scored the winner against Crystal Palace. So you could see it was not an Andy Carroll situation. Andy Carroll looks to me has always looked like a pub footballer, but Christian Benteke looked like he had ability. And then when Klopp comes, it's a manager who strictly does not play with a striker like that. You need to be far more mobile, far more tactically aware, have far more better ability at pressing the ball and link up play. So it was never going to work on the Klopp. So from that point of view, he's a little bit unlucky. What's happened since, I can't explain, because he can't seem to score to save his life unless it's a penalty. So Neil, how good was Benteke? Because if it's fair to say we got the best out of Collymore, you've definitely got the best out of Benteke.
Yes, Benteke is the epitome of one of the things that Aston Villa have done right in the transfer market over the last couple of years. Came in under Paul Lambert, and Lambert just knew how to get him playing. He was outstanding. Scored 23 goals in the season. First Villa player to break 20 goals in the season in quite some time. He was all things to everything. He ran the show against Liverpool. I think it was in 2012 or 13. He was just fantastic that day. The day that we won 3-1 in Anfield, and Andy
could have been more, by the way. He's absolutely destroyed us that day.
Yeah, he was unplayable. He really was. There was comparisons of Didier Drogba being thrown around and everything at the time. Your guess is as good as mine as how he didn't play well in Liverpool. But my hypothesis on it is that his agent was a thundering absolute. I don't know what I can swear in this podcast. But
you can.
Guy. He was a prick, essentially. Right. And he's been proven to be that in the way that he's negotiated with clubs subsequently. And he's negotiated with Crystal Palace. But he just, one of these guys that got in Benteke's ear at the time. There was even some doubts as to whether he was actually a legal agent, a proper agent, but got in Benteke's ear, completely, spun yarns to him, and he just never really was the player since. Is
it fair to say he's one of the best strikers Villa have ever had in the Premiership area, along with say Dwight York, Abong Lahore? I mean, wasn't a great goal scorer, but he was a very good player for Villa. I mean, if you were to put the top 3 best strikers in the Premiership era, he'd be in there, wouldn't he?
Oh yeah, but I was shouted out. Give me Dwight York and Benteke up front, and there's a Premier League trophy there somewhere. They were just, the two of them were just fantastic. But yeah, as I say, he's never found his form again, and he's coming up on 30 years of age. Would I have him back at Villa? Absolutely. I think I'd take him for free.
Anto, were you buying any of that defence that I put towards him there?
I think you make points that are hard to argue with. I mean, again, it's just he was unfortunate, I guess, in that a manager came in with such a different philosophy and the way he wanted to play, but he just wasn't a part of Liverpool's future. In fairness, Klopp, when he came in, there was a lot of players there that are still, well, not a lot, but there's players there that were there then that are still there now, and there were other lads that he really gave a chance to. He gave guys 2 or 3 years, and those players were versatile and suited to the way he wanted to play. And Benteke, absolutely, it's not just that he wasn't suited, he actually went against the way he wanted to play. There was the first 2 or 3 years with Klopp at Liverpool, everybody was screaming for him to get a striker. He was a little bit ahead. It was this new way of playing where why do we need a striker? We don't need a striker. We have players who can play from the wide and play deep and through the middle in Firmino, Mane and Salah that are capable of getting you 50, 60 goals.
Right.
Liverpool are now more potent than we've ever seen them, and they don't actually have what you call a traditional recognised number 9. And so say someone like Divock Origi has remained at the club, whereas I don't think Origi is a great player, in the sense of you put say a top player like Mane or Salah, but he has contributed enormously to Liverpool in the last 2-3 years because he has the qualities that Klopp can harness. You know, he can run down the flanks, he can play through the middle or on the right or on the left. Whereas Benteke was never like that. He was a guy you needed to bounce off him. You know, you needed to play him through the middle in like a traditional old-fashioned English number 9. So he just wasn't ever suited to that. And why he's gone off a cliff in the way he has, I don't know. Because I knew that he wasn't. I could see it was never going to work from Liverpool. But I fully expected him to go somewhere else and start scoring goals again. So it's funny. Neil touches on it there, like talking about his agent, and you know, there's extenuating circumstances that we don't always see or understand. But you know, I could see that he wasn't suited to Liverpool, but that I could also see that he was a decent, more than a decent striker, and I can't explain why the goals have dried up and he's gone off a cliff in the way he has.
All right, lads.
I did think he was a good player.
There's a few more we could go on. You know, you got your James Milners and Ivan Leonardsons, but we'll leave it there for the ex-players. I'm going to ask you each 2 questions just to wrap this up. I'm going to ask you for your favourite ever Liverpool Villa moment. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about that. But first of all, I want to ask each of you, for a brief answer, Neil, are Villa staying up this season?
I have to say yes.
I think based on.
I think that they will. I think if they get out of the traps early, they've got Sheffield United and I think Newcastle.
And you've got us, remember.
Yep. And hopefully you'll have the league well wrapped up and half your players will be still on the piss at that stage. So it'll be easy to. But do you know what? Play all your kids again, so we could win 5-0. That would do.
Forgot about that.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, if you see Caoimhin Kelleher on the team sheet, then I'd crack up on a beer if I was you, Neil. And Anto, I'd love to ask you: are Liverpool going to win the league? And I've never been this cocky in my life. We know we're winning it. Are Villa staying up?
Look, I don't particularly want to see Villa go down. I think they will, though. I fear that they will go down. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
I hope I'm wrong.
So, Neil, I don't know if you were taking the piss or you were being honest, but your favourite all-time Liverpool Villa moment or game?
I actually think that game where Benteke and Andy Vyman ran roughshod. I watched it in a dodgy stream in a house with about 7 other Liverpool fans, and I've never sat and clenched my fists in my pockets so hard when goals went in, because I knew my life was under threat at that period of time.
But Villa have a great record at Anfield. Like, I remember they beat us the first year of that Balotelli season. They beat us. I remember they beat us 3-1 as well, the 2009-2010, where Ashley Young, I think, scored a penalty. They beat us when John Gregory was there a couple of times. Yeah. They even, in that 13-14 season when we were storming, we won Villa came and got a 2-2 draw. Villa have a great record at Anfield. And Paul Lambert, Kieran Clark looked like Fabio Cannavaro one day when he was playing there. I don't know what was going on. Anto, your favourite, this is the last question, favourite all-time Liverpool Villa game or moment?
Well, this season is up there just because of how important it felt. But I'm going to say when Liverpool were 3-0 up inside 8 minutes that was in 96, wasn't it? Because I'd never seen I didn't even know that this could happen in a game of football. Like, we've seen subsequently, especially the 13-14 season, where Liverpool had this way of blowing teams out of the water in the first 15, 20 minutes. So, you know, you started to see that. But at that time, I'd never seen anything like it. And, of course, the Fowler goal that we were talking about earlier, where he kind of twirled away from Staunton and then slammed it into the top corner, is still one of my favourite ever Liverpool goals. So that's just me.
Well, we're going to wrap it up now, lads. That's been brilliant. Neil, can you just plug your podcast before we go and tell us what can people expect on the pod? When is it out? And what are you going to do in there?
Mm-hmm. So we'll actually have another pod ourselves out over the next day, so I'm going recording it right now. But it's For the Love of Paul McGrath Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Mac For the Love of. There is, if you just type in "For the Love of Paul McGrath" anywhere, you'll find us. But yeah, we usually have stuff out weekly, sometimes twice a week. And when the league is back again, we usually go sometimes up to 4 times a week as well with podcasts. So if there's any closet Villa fans out there that are just riding the bandwagon of Liverpool at the moment, that want to maybe come back home, we'll always welcome you with open arms in our podcast.
Absolutely brilliant. Great debut from Neil. Thanks a million. And thanks a million to Anto and anyone's listening. Thanks a million. I found that I thought was fun. I thought that was informative. And hopefully the next time we're doing a podcast, Liverpool will have started up playing again and we'll have beaten, we can curse on this podcast. We've beaten the Blue Shite. So thanks a million. And